and your muscularis externa, muscularis mucosa. Submucosa is here. And I'm going to zoom around so we can get to, here's a gland, submucosal gland. You can see looks kind of glandular. I'll go to the other ones over here. Submucosal glands. Anyone have any idea what this is? I doubt any of you will know what it is. It's a very dense collection of cells. These are all nuclei of cells. This is a little patch of lymphoid tissue. These are all white blood cells congregated here to intercept bacteria. There's a lot of lymphoid tissue, and this is a lymph node that's associated with the esophagus. We didn't talk about it. I'm not going to test you on a lymph node, but that's what. But I wanted to point it out to you because all lymph nodes look like this. So I'm going to point out some areas in some of the other slides, and you'll see that same pattern of a dense collection of really tiny nuclei. That's characteristic of lymphoid tissue. Okay. You'll notice that the esophagus has all these folds in it. When it's at rest, it's pretty much collapsed. When you have food in it, it expands. It expands only because it has these longitudinal folds running down it. Because stratified squamous doesn't stretch. Only transitional stretches. So we have to have folds in it so it can accommodate large boluses of food. Any questions on esophagus?
Where's the skeletal and the smooth muscle?
Well, I don't know exactly where they are in this one. This one says, oh, so this is from the middle third, which has a little bit of both. I'm not going to have you tell me whether it's skeletal or smooth. But obviously, if you zoom in and you see striations, which I'm not seeing, there it is. There's some skeletal, there's some smooth, right next to each other. Pretty clearly different. Smooth, skeletal, kind of mixed in. I didn't think it would be that easy. By the way, this is the circular layer going around. This is the longitudinal layer because this is a cross section. Longitudinal is running up and down, in and out of the plane of the section. So it looks kind of circular in cross section, but these are running around in bundles. So that's the esophagus. And what I'd like to show you next is the gastroesophageal junction. The junction where the esophagus ends and the stomach begins. And it's a very clear transition. So what kind of epithelium is in the esophagus, in the mucosa? What's the epithelium here? Stratified squamous. What's the epithelium for the stomach's mucosa? Simple columnar. So let's take a look. And can you see where the transition happens? This is the epithelial layer. These are the muscle layers down here. Stratified squamous, not stratified squamous. Very abrupt. There's no gradual transition from one type to another. It's a sharp delineation. So if I zoom in on this part, you start to see a lot of the mucous surface cells, all those goblet cells on the surface. And then deeper down, I'll point out, whoops, in another slide down here, you get into the pits, into the glandular tissue. But I'll show you another image that has more well-developed pits. What's this?
Lymph.
Yep, a little bit of lymph tissue right there. A little bit more of it right there. Very characteristic whenever you find a lymph node in this tissue. Remember, there's a lot of this GALT, this gut-associated lymphoid tissue everywhere. You can see patches of it all over the place. So what you have here is mucosa and lamina propria and muscularis mucosae. There's very little submucosa, and then you're into muscularis externa, which is all of this. The serosa is out here. It doesn't show up well in any of these sections. I think they try to show it. Well, no, they don't even show. They show the adventitia for There's the adventitia of the esophagus. Right away, one of the first questions you ask, if you know that it's GI tract, and obviously it's not an eye or an ear, so it's GI tract. The first thing is look at the epithelium. Look at the mucosa. Is it stratified squamous or not? If it's stratified squamous, it's esophagus. There's nothing else, right? We're not doing pharynx, which would also be stratified squamous, right? And if it's tongue, it's going to look very different as well, with all the taste buds embedded in it. If it's not, then you have to start to look for clues. If you see a lot of goblet cells on the surface, but secretory cells below, well, that's stomach. If you see a bunch of projections called villi sticking out, well, that's small intestine. Okay, so let's look at the fundus of the stomach, fundic region, and what I want to point out is you can see that the surface cells and the necks are all these really big cells that secrete a lot of mucus, and then all of a sudden they change down here into something a little darker. These are all of the cells in the pits that are your G cells, your endocrine cells, your cells that secrete pepsinogen, your chief cells, right? And your parietal cells are all down here. So they're very distinct layers. Surface cells, neck cells, and all of the secretory cells down in the pits. There's very thin muscularis mucosa. You see it? Very thin. Then you're into submucosa. Not much to say in the stomach. And then you're into your circular and longitudinal layers. Somewhere in here is going to be a third layer, not easy to see. The obliques don't show up very well. They're hard to tell apart from the circular layer. So that's stomach. This is a great slide to study off of. It's from each of the three portions of the small intestine. And right away, do you see how I've got extensive villi, and the villi begin to disappear once I get to the ileum. That's duodenum, jejunum, ileum. Mm-hmm. Now, let's go into early duodenum. There's a bunch of lymphoid tissue there. And what you're going to see is these are the villi sticking out. Mm-hmm. What's all this? So this is villi. This is the muscularis externa. See that little line? I'm going to zoom in. That's, muscularis mucosa. That's all muscularis mucosa. What's all this? What does it look like? That's all Brunner's glands. In this region, which must be really early in the duodenum, it is dominated by those bicarbonate and mucus-producing Brunner's glands. Basically, that's all you see of the submucosa is glands, secreting a lot of that protection to neutralize the acids. And then you have your muscularis externa, and then serosa way out here. You move over to the jejunum, and the submucosa has largely disappeared. We don't need all the room for those submucosal glands anymore. So now you're dominated by villi and crypts. So you see lots of extensive villi sticking in here. And if you zoom in, you'll see simple columnar epithelium. In the middle, you really can't tell the villus, the lacteal. It doesn't really stand out, but somewhere in there is going to be a lacteal. Right? So lamina propria, lacteal, and blood vessels. Down here will be down in the crypts. There's a muscularis mucosae, almost no submucosa. You're right into muscularis externa, and there, that thin line is serosa. That's it. You get to the ileum, and it starts to get pretty boring. You still have some villi, but they're pretty pathetic looking. Really not extensive. Still have, well, what's supposed to be simple columnar, but unfortunately, the way it was sectioned, they're not showing up very well. I have any sections where I have simple columnar epithelium. This looks promising. Come on. It doesn't want to focus. The server is slow. It's not focusing. I think I'm crashing the server. Anyway, simple columnar, very reduced pits, muscularis mucosae, very little submucosa, and then your muscle layers, and then finally a little thin serosa on the outside. Large intestine. One of the things that tells you large intestine in this image, see these three bulges? One here, one here, one here. What are those? The taenia coli, the longitudinal muscle that's reduced to 3 narrow bands. Then the circular muscle is deep to that. Those are the taenia coli. Now but the best way to identify any of these is always focus on the mucosa. So let's zoom in. And what do you see? Nothing but goblet cells everywhere. Goblet cells everywhere. Nothing looks like this. We had goblet cells at the surface of the stomach, but they didn't go all the way down. There's the muscularis mucosae right there. There's the submucosa, and now we're into the circular layer and a taenia coli. Okay, do you see that? And then what's this? That's a Peyer's patch, really big lymphoid nodule. Thousands and thousands of little immune cells. Eosinophils, neutrophils, basophils, all packed in, lymphocytes, all packed in together. There's another area, lymphoid tissue. Not that bad. So as with all the other histology we've done, look for the patterns. And the biggest pattern is look at the epithelium of the mucosa. Look at the arrangement of the mucosa. Do you see villi? Do you see lots of goblet cells everywhere or just at the surface? Do you see a stratified squamous? It's going to lead you in the right direction to identify where you are.